Hey everybody, Tim here with today's episode of Enterprise, Season 1, Episode 1, Broken Bow. So, brand new series, going into lots of stuff going on. So I'll kind of start out with some of my first impressions with the series. How I remember when this first came out, 2001, I was living with my father at the time. And we didn't have cable or whatever, I think it was UPN at the time, where we couldn't really watch this show. And so my father actually had one of his coworkers tape it on a VHS every week to bring it home so we could watch it. This only lasted for maybe 2 months, so 6 to 8 episodes, and that's as far as I ever got into the show. And then he got bored of it or whatever, and he ended up stopping, and then I never saw the rest of it. And then many years later, probably 2008, 2009-ish, I finally just went out, I bought every Star Trek show on DVD, including this one, and that was the first time I ever binged it. So it's been 10 years since I've watched this, and that was the only time. I've watched it through the entire series one time, and that was it. So, that being said, I don't remember a lot about it. I remember liking it more than most people seem to, but I think I hated the third season because I just thought it was boring. It was just them being lost in a nebula, not asking for directions. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong. And then I remember watching an interview and them being like, we wanted to do a 26-part episode. And I was like, yeah, it felt like it. And then the series finale, which I absolutely hated with a passion, but I'll wait till we get to that point. Realistically, I probably would skip over this one again, but I feel like since I am doing all of these reviews, I may as well just say to hell with it and just do it all over again. And who knows, maybe it'll help me appreciate it more or maybe less. That being said, so I post these videos in two places. I post them one on my YouTube channel and one on Facebook in a geek group that I'm part of. That being said, if you go back to 2015, technically, I guess it was my second post because my first post was actually a selfie. My first actual post in the group was me saying, hi, welcome, I'm glad to be a part of this group. My first confession is I love the theme song to Enterprise. Coincidentally, Tim Barker commented on that, and I think that may have been his first post. And then here it is, 15, 16, 17, 4 years later, and he still kind of comments on my Star Trek post sometimes. So I think that's kind of cool. So anyway, and I absolutely love this theme song. I remember even thinking it sounded like Rod Stewart, the guy that does sing the theme song, and it's not, it's him doing a cover, but Rod Stewart did sing the original for the Patch Adams soundtrack. So I think that's interesting, and I love it. I remember being a kid and buying the actual CD soundtrack of it because it had the extended version, so it's even longer, and I loved it. I thought it was absolutely great. I love the background of all the different, images of different Enterprises throughout the years, and even the clip of the Phoenix from First Contact. So, this is just all of my impressions beginning with Enterprise. So, like I said, a lot of people really don't like this series. I do. I think it's okay. It's a prequel. It's very, very difficult to do prequels because either you do them and you do them very well done, but you just do the information we already had, and it's like, okay, so you just told me everything I already knew, so what was the point in it? Or you completely change everything, and you're like, why are you completely rewriting history? So either way, a lot of prequels are kind of doomed to fail. It's very difficult to do them correctly and do a well-done job. This particular series takes place kind of in the middle ground. It's roughly 100 years before Kirk, and it's roughly 100 years after First Contact. So it's kind of in that middle area. It's before the Federation, but it's still... I think it's before Starfleet even. So it's just kind of Earth's ship going out into space. That being said, from the very beginning, it starts out with a Klingon. Personally, I think that was a mistake because it starts out with the rigid Klingons. So everybody and their brother is like, wait a minute, Klingons look like this in the original series. They look like this in the Next Generation. Why do they look like this before Enterprise? And that's a good question. It doesn't quite make sense, especially when they did kind of address that in Deep Space Nine, where Worf is like, oh, we don't talk about that. So already kind of a mistake in just the overall look. And I think it's like season 2 or 3 where they actually start to dive into why they change the appearance. But still, it's way too confusing to start off right off the bat. And then the little squishy aliens that like fit through the door, who ends up being the Suliban. Again, brand new alien, no idea. We learn a little bit about how far the technology is. Like they can go warp 4.5. The Enterprise NX01 is the first ship to go warp 5. Neptune and back in 6 minutes. And it's like, ooh, wow, look at that. Which kind of going back to the original series, The Next Generation, where we realize like trans warp and stuff like that, and how like warp 10 in The Next Generation is very different than warp 10 in the original series. So the whole warp continuity thing is very, very confusing. They bring up that it's a Klingon and he comes from the homeworld of Kronos, which again they're like, what is that? Kronos was never mentioned in the original series, not until we got into the movies. So again, kind of messing with the continuity thing. Just meeting some of the characters like Reed is kind of fun. Mayweather, clearly the Harry Kim of the show. Like he's just the ensign young kid, or the Chekhov of the crew. Trip Tucker, which is kind of everybody's favorite for some reason. I never quite got that. Sato, who's like, she's really great with languages, kind of actually reminded me of more of SG-1. She's obviously the Uhura, like the communications officer, but very reminiscent of like Daniel Jackson from Stargate and just knowing all of these languages. James Cromwell makes an appearance. Now, every Star Trek from The Next Generation on has had a cameo from somebody from the past, like whether it be Bones or Picard or Quark. For Enterprise, you can't really go backwards through previous shows, so they actually chose a good choice. They went with James Cromwell, and it was like 90 years ago, and he says the line, "We're going where no man has gone before." And he repraises the role of Zefram Cochrane from First Contact. I think that's great. I actually really, really appreciated that one. Meeting Dr. Phlox, kind of interesting, but once again, brand new alien. So anytime you do these prequels with a brand new alien, it kind of takes me out a little bit, because I'm like, okay, who is this? Why have we never seen him before? Granted, in The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, we see a crap ton of new aliens that we've never seen before, but still, like, if you're going to be a member of the Enterprise crew, I feel like we should probably know who you are. The whole, like, intruder alert with the Suliban getting on board and then Archer being taken, like, by this point, I'm like, okay, I'm losing interest in this pilot. Which, realistically, if we look at, like, the pilots in general, whether we count The Cage or Where No Man Has Gone Before, both of them are great pilots for the original series. The Next Generation was not that great of a pilot, but I still would put it above this one a little bit, just because Q is awesome, but the jellyfish bring it back down. Deep Space Nine was a really well done pilot. That's actually probably third in my list, and The Caretaker is probably fourth. So I would actually go with the pilot, or with The Cage, Where No Man Has Gone Before, The Emissary, The Caretaker. Oh God, what is the Next Generation pilot? That one that I can't remember. Encounters at Farpoint, and then I would go with Broken Bow. I would say this is actually my least favorite pilot of the TV show so far, to be honest with you. As much as I love Scott Bakula, like, he was great in Quantum Leap, fantastic actor, I get what they're doing, where they're really kind of pitting him against T'Pol, and he's kind of got, like, that, like, almost racist attitude, where we see that the Vulcans have been keeping humanity down, I guess it's not an enlightened species where it's kind of womanizing and stuff, but just the way he talks to T'Pol, where he's like, "I'm bigger than you. I will knock you on your ass." And it's like, I don't like it. I'm not digging his relationship with her so far. And I don't remember it being like that, so I do think it changes, but I'm really not liking it. The Sulibans overall, where we learn that they actually are not supposed to be like chameleons and squishy and stuff like that. They're actually supposed to be more humanoid, but they've been genetically altered. And it's part of a temporal Cold War where they're taking directions from the future. And I'm just like, there's so much going on in this pilot. Like, can we just bring it down a little bit? Because by this point, I'm so confused and I'm so lost at what's going on. The whole scene of Trip and T'Pol in the shower, I was like, no, like, just stop. Stop adding the sex appeal. Stop doing this, where they're just rubbing lotion in each other in the blue lighting, and I'm like, Little stuff I did like was kind of like the let's recommend seatbelts for the future, which is kind of a joke throughout like Star Trek in general, because I mean it wasn't until I think there were seatbelts in the animated series, coincidentally enough, but I don't think we actually saw them until Nemesis. I think it was a deleted scene in Nemesis or Insurrection where they saw the seatbelts come out. The grappler was kind of funny, where I mean clearly they don't have a beam yet to grab onto people, so they just have like this shooty, like they just shoot the ship and grab onto it with a cable, and it's like, okay, now we got it, instead of a beam. And so I was like, oh, that's really kind of out there. So I was like, it's kind of interesting, but it's bringing it too far down for me. And then finally, when they finally do beam Archer out, and it's like the first successful person being beamed out of there, and they're like, I'm sorry, we didn't have a choice, and he's like, I'm intact, I'm good, let's go. And just so it kind of shows, it's one more like aspect of how far from the original series we are, that we have the grappler and we can barely teleport safely. So it's just kind of over the top of like, hey, this is the past, look at this. And I couldn't really dig it. It was more funny than it was serious. So overall, like I said, to me, this is actually the worst pilot. And what's a little sad is like, so this entire series is 98 episodes. I mean, if you compare that to the original series, which was 89, it outlasted the original series, but then the original series also had an animated series and 6 movies. So Enterprise is the bottom of the barrel for like all of the spin-offs and everything. It's kind of like at the shortest amount of episodes and everything. And I don't know, it's very, very difficult to get into. I'm hoping as I do these reviews, I kind of warm up to it, or who knows, I'm just going to be miserable for 98 episodes straight until we get to Discovery. So for those who have seen this one, I'm curious to see what you guys think about the theme song, about all of the characters, about it being a prequel. What did you think about the Klingons? What did you think about Zefram Cochrane? Just kind of overall, what did you guys think about Enterprise? I am excited to go through this with you guys together, but I'm not overly excited to do it like in general. So let me know what you guys think. I do look forward to it, and I will see you guys next time for Fight or Flight.